Hello there, and welcome to this episode of the Movies in Focus podcast. I'm Niall Brown. Solomon Gray, the writer-director of the quietly unsettling horror film We're Not Safe Here, joins this episode of the Movies in Focus podcast. We're Not Safe Here is a deft little chiller that is notable for its ability to get under your skin with subtle psychological horror rather than cheap shocks. Solomon discusses the inspirations behind the film, the creative challenges of crafting a slow-burn thriller, and the emotional depths explored through the nuanced performances of stars Hayley McFarland and Sharmita Bhattacharya. Fans of intelligent atmospheric cinema won't want to miss this insightful chat, and as always, I hope you enjoy what we have to talk about. Solomon, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Niall.
And I just have to say, I loved the movie. I was really blown away by it. It sort of was perfect for me. I thought fantastic.
I really appreciate that. I appreciate that you vibed on it, and I know you spoke with Sharmita and Hayley, and they're fantastic. So I'm glad you had a chance to talk to them too.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those films that it's a horror film, obviously, but it sort of runs a fine line between art house film and sort of a commercial film. Is that something that you wanted to do as a filmmaker?
Yeah, that was definitely uh, the goal when we're making a movie is to sort of use the elements of horror to try to, come at some of these issues from a slightly different angle, and to try to take some calculated risks with what we're doing, from a storytelling standpoint. So from this one, for this movie, I think it was about really building the space for, like, kind of like it's been called, I think you've even called it like a two-hander, in the sense that we have, two really good actors just sort of one telling a story, one listening to a story, kind of really allowing that, just giving that space to breathe and to play out and to sort of make something new out of that dramatically. So it was definitely about, from the beginning, doing something more than just, having like jump scares and things like that, which I love, but it was kind of really about doing something a little different.
And I mean, as you said before, I talked with Sharmita and Haley, who are both fantastic in the film. But as a director, are you very nervous until you get them on set? I know they said they had a lengthy rehearsal process where they hung out and they did a lot of work together. But for you, presumably they arrived on set and suddenly you're like, God, I hope they deliver. Did it feel like that for you?
I mean, there's fear about a lot of things. It was mainly, I mean, if I'm being like totally honest, most of my fears were about how I was going to screw up, not how they were going to screw up. Because, I'd had some time with them in rehearsals. I'd had time to sort of work with them through the story. We spent a lot of time sort of workshopping the story, not just the acting of it, but they were sort of active co-writers in the story, and certain elements that they added and certain elements that they subtracted. And by the time we'd gone through with that, I sort of knew that they were going to do a great job. So it was really more about the pressure of, like, okay, this is a heavy lift for them, right? Don't screw stuff up. Make sure you get the coverage. Make sure you sort of do justice to the performance they're putting together. But I mean, almost from the beginning, I was really excited about, what they were bringing to their performances. So no, but I had plenty of fear, but uh, not about that aspect.
I mean, one of the things, I mean, it's such a tense film. I mean, like we've been saying, it is the two of them sitting in a room for the majority of the film, talking, and somebody's telling a story, but you're building tension as a filmmaker. And again, when you go into something like this, do you have full confidence that you're able to build that tension? I know you've got great music and great sound design, but what's it like when you're sort of sitting there in the editing room going, my God, I know I want this to be scary, but does that make sense?
Yeah, no, Niall, that is the fear. Like, the fear is that you go in, you know, you plan as much as you can plan. You have an idea, you have a notion or a hope, an expectation that it'll work, and really, even once I knew that the performances were going to be sort of great, if anything, it was like, okay, how do I make sure that the other elements, how do we all collectively make sure that we're putting things together in a way so that it is a story that ratchets up the tension and starts and is building to something, right? Otherwise, it's just a story. For It's funny though, because for me, that hope and that expectation, that start was a movie called My Dinner with Andre, which is not a horror movie, but which has one particular scene which always struck me, and it's a scene uh, where Andre Gregory is talking about one of the happenings that he experienced when he sort of went off and disappeared, and one of them involved him being buried alive. It is a single shot with a slow push in to Andre's face as he's talking about the experience of being buried alive. And I remember, long before I decided that I was going to try to write or to direct something, I remember the suffocating feeling of a 4.5 minute continuous shot as Andre Gregory just discussing, just talking about this feeling and what it was like to have all of your senses deprived and to really feel in that moment like you're being buried alive. That was a kind of terror that's a lot different than, say, kind of to your point, like, like a jump scare or something like that. And there are a few in this movie, but we were much more interested in the kind of tension that comes from the slow grip of fear that comes from a good story. So that was the hope. In the execution, it's really like you have that hope, you have that sort of at least some basis that it can work, but the fear comes when you're really trying to put all those technical elements together, and that's the gift of having the cast and the crew that this movie had. That really, like you said, you mentioned the performances, you mentioned the sound, the lighting, the cinematography. Like everybody on this movie really just brought like their A game, and I do think it shows in the final product.
Oh, it definitely does because as somebody who reviews films, I've seen a lot of horror films and I've seen a lot of bad horror films. And I love seeing a great horror film, which this is, because it plays with your expectations. You imagine it's going to be one thing. Obviously, it begins with a very iconic image of somebody with a sort of a pillowcase over their head. And then it becomes something different, almost like an abstract horror film. And for me, that's great because it isn't somebody chasing somebody around the house with a knife or a chainsaw. It takes it to a different level. And I don't want to say the phrase elevated horror because I don't like it, but but it really is like a classier version of a horror film.
Yeah, and not that there's anything wrong with a chainsaw
No,
wielding,
no.
knife wielding mate. I love it. I love horror. I feel like all horror is elevated, but I think when you have a movie like at our sort of price point, our budget point, with that's sort of going to be a little more compressed, you have to kind of you have to take like more risks. You have to try to do things a little differently. If at our budget you're trying to do like a down the middle horror movie that you've seen before, it just feels like a cheap version of what you've seen elsewhere. But like with this, it really was an opportunity to kind of the what I've described it is like building the roller coaster a little differently. And I do think with some horror films, there is sort of like, and we like that in some instances, right? Like we know when the scares are going to come. There's a certain story or meta story that these horror movies kind of tell. And this was really the opportunity to do that, to try something different, to try to play with the pacing and see if that doesn't hit people a little differently. So that was always, again, kind of baked into what we were trying to do here. So, I mean, I'm excited that it came together the way it did, obviously.
No, and it's great. And one of the things I like, and I talked to Hayley and Sharmita about it earlier, is that it leaves a lot of interpretation open for the audience. And they said that they had certain thoughts and opinions about what things were about, might have been slightly different from you, and probably what I've read into it. Is that something you always wanted when you were putting it on the page?
Yeah, yeah. There's a quote, and I'm going to butcher it, from Christopher Nolan, who said something like, you know, the job of a movie, your job isn't to necessarily always understand a movie, it's to experience it. And if you've experienced it, you get it. And the certain ambiguities that are sort of baked into like films, and it has to be what he called it a productive ambiguity. Like I have to have an idea of what it is, or he has to have an idea is when he's making it, but it really is about kind of leaving that open for people to kind of bring their own experiences and their own interpretations. It's part of the engagement of a movie, right? You kind of want that, you want enough ambiguity in there so that there's something for the the audience to play with, and especially for a horror movie, right? I mean, that's why killers have masks, right? There's certain things that we should not know. A, it gives something for the audience to do, and B, it's scarier. The unknown is scarier than the known, right? Once you know it, you domesticate it and it's less scary. But so uh, the balance was trying to have it ambiguous in a way that's not going to frustrate people, but will kind of like draw them in and maybe have them start to interrogate what's really going on here.
And when you've written that in the script, and you're trying to raise financing for it, does somebody come along, the money men, and go, "Can we not just have somebody burst through the door with a chainsaw?" Do you have to fight for that ambiguity, or is it something that everybody goes, "Do you know what? We have faith in this. We believe."
Yeah, I mean, right. I mean, I think the production team, you got to have a production team that's kind of on board with that because there's always this tension between, you know, like we want to provide answers, we want to provide certainty with no, let's leave it open. And I think it's scarier if we kind of maybe or sometimes it's not necessarily binary. It's like, well, can we just do a little bit more? And those are conversations we're always having. And I know that like like Sonny Molly, who is you know brilliant director, writer, producer, his movies, who we were gifted with him working on this, and he provided his obviously tons of his creative genius are sort of like shot through this. But like if you've watched some of his other movies, that kind of ambiguity, he also kind of likes to have this kind of productive ambiguity. So a lot of the good news is that we didn't have a lot of like isn't this is a good time to kind of like have a guy jump out of a closet with a chainsaw, and before he does it he'll explain everything that's going to happen and why he's going to chainsaw all these people. It's more like, well, where do we put the ambiguity and how much is enough? And those are a lot of creative discussions that we have that I think are, especially in the editing room, where we're sort of all sitting down and thinking like, is this too much information? Is this not enough information? Is this not going to be interesting and provocative and just going to be frustrating because like what just happened? So that's really a lot of the work that went into not just the writing, but the writing that takes place on set and the writing that takes place in the editing day. So um uh but yeah, we didn't have too much of that kind of like everything must be explained. People who wanted that kind of a response probably, they weren't necessarily the people who were going to be like, yes, I would like to finance this. So we found our people, we found our team, and then we moved forward with it.
You mentioned Sonny Malley there, and a film that I also really like, which you wrote, was Hurt from a few years ago. And again, that's another film that takes the horror genre and inverts it in a way that is very special. So, another film I just wanted to reference and tell you that I thought was fantastic too. So,
Yeah, I wrote it with Sonny, and it's sort of, I like to think they kind of have the same sort of sensibility in a sense, in not just the pacing, but sort of atmosphere over jumps and things like that. I think those are things we both vibe on. So yeah, I mean, Hurt was a great experience, and that partly led to the experience of We're Not Safe Here as well. So
well, I mean, as soon as We're Not Safe Here started, like the opening shot, and the sound, I just thought, this is my sort of film where there's a coolness to it, but it draws you in. And you don't get that. A lot of films, they're either very grimy and that they don't, or they're very polished. And this is this sweet spot where you feel like you're watching something that's handcrafted but hasn't gone through, you know, 50 hands in order to be crafted.
That's I appreciate that. That is like a compliment that I find near and dear. But and that's also, again, I think that's part of the advantage of having a slightly smaller, again, we have a little bit, we don't have a giant budget, we don't have a giant team, but with that, there's power in that, right? There's power in that, as if everyone is on the same page about what sort of the vision of the movie should be, what the sensibility should be, and we're all generally on the same choices about what makes a movie special and what we want to preserve, that kind of kernel. We can have discussions around the margins, but we're not having the kinds of discussions that really are going to dilute what we feel like is like the nucleus of the thing. And that I find, I'm very flattered that you said that, because I do think that is like the advantage of kind of having a smaller um like a smaller team sort of making the movie. I described it like, it's like, all right, look, we're just like a punk band, you know? We got to go out there. We got the same vision. We don't have the best equipment. We're just going to shred and we're going to make a beautiful noise together. And that's kind of what with that you have that advantage when you don't have like a giant team around you. It's just like a small bunch of you who just are kind of in parallel about what needs to be done.
And does sort of modern distribution, I know sort of in the last 5 or so years, things have really changed, digital and streaming and everything else. Does the new distribution platforms make that easier for you to have more confidence that you can be slightly more offbeat and know that your film will find its audience, where it's not competing with, I don't know, a Marvel movie on its opening weekend or something along those lines?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't pretend to be the wily veteran who can give you like, that is like, this is my first film, so I should just sit down and take notes, right? But it's like, but I do feel like the fact that I'm sitting here talking to you is kind of like a testament to what technology has been able to do, and sort of opened it up to different voices, different perspectives. Um, and really allows, through all these distribution channels, to like a movie that isn't a Marvel movie to find its audience, right? And it's created some chaos, obviously, in some instances, in the sense of like what is traditionally known as like a distribution format. But um, I also think it's created opportunities. So personally, I'm very grateful for it. And I do agree with you that it probably does give, you know, smaller movies like this one a puncher's chance to really get eyes on it and maybe get some word of mouth, and um, get a chance to be seen.
You just touched it that this is your first movie, and this must be the first time you're doing all the promotional stuff. How's that? How does that feel for a filmmaker? Obviously, there's the stress of making a film, the fear of putting it out there in the world. Now you've got to sit in front of somebody like me and talk about it. What's that like for you?
Huh. I wasn't expecting this one, Niall.
Not to
I
sound
don't
like
know.
you're
I
a
mean,
psychiatrist or anything.
yeah, well, no, it's just this is an interesting question. I hadn't actually had a chance to reflect on it. What's been very sort of gratifying about this whole experience, and for me, like, I started off as a writer. Like, I enjoy writing. I love writing. I've written for a number of years. I made a short with some friends that I really liked, like back in, I don't know, 2016, 2017. My first experience being on like a real movie set was on Hurt. And it was eye-opening. I mean, Hurt was a, seeing all the moving parts in real time was a real experience. And on this one, I had written versions of this script and talked about it with Sonny for years. And once it became time that it was coming clear that I was going to make it, from that point forward, I've kind of been living just very much moment to moment, which is actually, for me, like pretty refreshing. Like, when I was on set, I was only on set. When we were in editing, I was only about the editing. And now it's like, I every interview, like, it is just about what I'm doing. But to your point, like, I if you asked me before, do you like being in front of a no, I don't like it at all. But am I enjoying it more than I thought I would? Yeah, I actually I it's not as scary as I thought it would be, and it's been fun actually talking about the movie with folks and like kind of getting their perspective. And people have told me things that I expected and some things I haven't expected, so it's been fun overall.
Can it be frustrating as a creative person? And again, because the film is so abstract, is it a pain for you to try and explain the movie in a way that you don't want to ruin it for anyone by being very specific about what it's about? Or is it just great to be able to sort of talk about the intricacies of your storytelling, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, I think I think the challenge is for someone, you there's this like letting go that has to happen, right? Like once you're sort of trying to finesse every part of the movie at the writing stage, at the shoot stage, at the editing stage. There's always something that needs to be done, and then there's this part where it's like the movie's released. It is what it is. It's never going to get better. It's never going to get worse. It's done. And then I'm more interested right now in trying. I don't want to try to like. I'm more interested in like listening than talking in a lot of ways. I'm more interested in the feedback, like not just the positive, but the negative as well, and sort of like thinking about it and sort of sifting through it and sort of taking my own lessons from it. But what I will say is like I I don't like to I don't like to overshare my perspective too much, only because it's like, well, it's not my movie. It's like kind of your movie now, and you get to watch it. And in fact, if anything, you tell me what you think it's about. And sometimes I was like, yeah, that was right where what I thought it was going to be. Other times it's wildly different. And I mean, I don't argue with it. I just kind of take that note and I think about it like, again, back to the ambiguity question is like, well, is that is that a bug in what I've done or is it a feature, right? I wanted to create some ambiguity. Did I make it too big? Did I make it too little? Should I have explained more? Should I have? So it's kind of like you kind of take notes for like the next script. It's like, how can are there things that, is this part of like what I wanted to create, or is this like something I feel like I can refine and make better?
And speaking of the next script, are you working on something? Are you planning to direct? What is next in the pipeline for you as a director or a writer or both?
I guess both. I mean, there are a few projects that are in development, and we're pretty much at the nascent stages since we're pretty much all about sort of kind of we're all sort of enjoying, the experience of the movie being out. I enjoy talking about the movie and trying to like and getting people interested about in the movie and but I think there are a few projects I'm working on. I'm sure they are horror thriller type movies. Those are the ones I enjoy, and I certainly hope to have more news on those very soon.
And just one final question. Every
Sure.
good horror film has a sequel. This has an open end that could go in two or three different directions. Is that something that you've thought of, or is it just you're leaving it hanging at the end just for the sake of the story?
I have an outline for a sequel. I haven't shown anybody yet, but because it's just the way it ends. I mean, the basic idea of the movie is pretty simple, right? This woman, she's missing woman. She shows up on her friend's doorstep. She tells a story, and the story seems to be coming to life all around them in the house and threatening them both. But it also does open possibilities of how you could continue that story. And yeah, I absolutely have something drafted up, and I probably will circulate it around. I'll probably show it to Sunny, and we'll see what we can do with that.
Well, you've intrigued me with that because I would be very happy to sit and spend another couple of hours in that world of what you've created. So I look forward to that if it does come to fruition.
I appreciate that now, and I really appreciate the kind words. It means a lot.
No, well, thank you, and thank you for taking the time. And it's been really great chatting with you and sort of talking about a film. Like I said, I really enjoyed, and I really enjoyed Hurt. So to talk to a creator of something that's so enjoyable for me is always a pleasure.
Likewise, it's been. I really appreciate the kind words. I appreciate that you enjoyed it, and this was a real pleasure. So thank you for taking the time for me.
No, well, thank you, and yeah, hopefully we do it again in the future.
Let's do it. We'll do it for the sequel.
Definitely. Take care.
All right, take care now.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Movies in Focus podcast. You can download it wherever you get your podcasts, and I hope that you tell your friends about it. That's it for this time, and I'll see you at the movies.